On the afternoon of August 3, 1943, in a canvas tent on the island of Sicily, a three-star American general slapped a sick private across the face with a leather glove, called him a coward, and ordered him kicked out of an evacuation hospital. The private had a temperature of 102 degrees, malaria, dysentery. He was hiding both from his squad because he did not want to leave them. The general was George S. Patton. And what happened in the days after that slap? The report a soft-spoken army doctor sat down to write that evening, the locked drawer a lieutenant general put it in, the radio broadcast that broke the silence 3 months later in Washington, is one of the most important stories the United States Army has ever tried to forget. This is the true account, drawn from the official medical reports, the Eisenhower letter of August 17, 1943, and the testimony of the men and women who were in those tents. Sicily, August 1943. The island has been on fire for 33 days. Operation Husky began on July 10. By the first week of August, the Allied armies have torn their way up the Sicilian coast. The British under Montgomery grind north along the eastern shore. The Americans under Patton race west, then north, then east, in a famous and unauthorized lunge toward Messina. The terrain is volcanic rock, the roads are dust. The hills around Troina, Nicosia and Santo Stefano are studded with German machine gun positions, mortar pits and well-sitted mines. The cost is rising every day. The 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, has been in the line almost continuously since the landings at Gela. Its men are filthy, sleepless, dehydrated and increasingly hollow-eyed. Some have been fighting for a month with a single change of socks. Others carry shrapnel they have not told anyone about. The medics see what the official reports do not. A few miles behind them, near a stand of olive trees outside Nicosia, the 15th Evacuation Hospital is a city of canvas. White tents line up in neat rows. Generator wires run along the dirt. A wooden sign at the entrance shows a red cross. Inside the surgical tents, the air smells of ether, sulfur powder, blood and burned coffee, the nurses of the U. S-Army Nurse Corps work in 18-hour shifts. They are young, most are in their 20s or early 30s. They wear olive drab fatigues over their uniforms because skirts are useless in Sicily. They learned in stateside training how to take a pulse, change a dressing, hand a surgeon a hemostat. Here they have learned other things. How to find a vein in an arm slick with sweat. How to hold a teenager's hand while he asks for his mother. How to walk past a row of stretchers without slowing down. They do not talk much during a shift. There is no time. This is the world Private Charles Herman Cool walks into on the afternoon of August 2. Cool is 27 years old. Before the war he laid carpet in Mishawaka, Indiana, a small town where his father had once worked the railroads and his neighbors knew him by his first name. He is not a born soldier. He is a quiet, narrow-shouldered man with thin hair and a habit of looking at the floor when officers speak to him. He has been in Sicily since the landings. He has not slept properly in 11 nights. On August 2, his platoon medic sends him back from the line. He cannot keep food down. His hands shake when he tries to thread the bolt of his rifle. He arrives first at a battalion aid station, then is moved up the chain to the 15th Evacuation Hospital. A clerk writes on his medical card 3 words that will follow him for the rest of his life: psychoneurosis. Anxiety state, moderately severe. A nurse points him to a cot. He sits down. He does not say much. No one in the tent thinks he is unusual. They have seen 1,000 like him. While Cool lies on a cot in Nicosia, 60 miles away, in a requisitioned villa serving as 7th Army headquarters, Lieutenant General George Smith Patton Jr. is finishing a meeting that will reshape the next 10 days of his life. He is 57 years old. He stands 6 feet tall, square-shouldered, his face tanned from the open jeep he insists on riding in. He wears a steel helmet polished to a mirror finish, a tailored jacket with 3 rows of ribbons, and on his hips 2 ivory-handled revolvers, the Colt single-action army he has carried since the Mexican border in 1916, and a Smith & Wesson he acquired later in his career. He writes in his diary every night in a private code. He believes in destiny, he believes in cavalry charges. He believes in the chain of command, and he believes deeply in the moral weakness of men who hesitate. Across the desk from him sits Major General Clarence R. Hubner. Hubner is 54. He has just been appointed commander of the 1st Infantry Division, replacing the popular Terry de la Mesa Allen. Hubner is a stern, by-the-book officer who has inherited a division that is bone-tired and resentful. He needs to show his new army commander that he is in control. He tells Patton what a new commander tells his boss when his boss is George Patton. He tells him the front is thinning out. He tells him there are too many men in the hospitals. He uses a word that lands hard, malingerers. Patton does not need much convincing. He already believes that battle fatigue, what an earlier generation called shell shock, is a fiction invented by weak men to avoid duty. He has written this in private letters. He has said it in private speeches. To him, the rear area hospitals are not sanctuaries. They are hiding places. After the meeting, he tells his aide he intends to visit the evacuation hospitals himself. He wants to see these malingerers with his own eyes. That visit will become the first slap. August 3rd, 1943, afternoon. The general's convoy pulls up to the gate of the 15th Evacuation Hospital outside Nicosia in a cloud of white dust. Patton steps out first. He always steps out first. He walks down the gravel path between the tents, with his aides trailing 2 paces behind. The hospital commander is summoned. Nurses pause in their work to salute. The wounded sit up where they can. Some of them cheer. Patton moves from cot to cot, doing what he came to do, the part he is good at. He stops at a young infantryman with bandaged eyes and tells him he is proud of him. He pins a Purple Heart on a sergeant whose leg has been amputated below the knee. The boy weeps. Patton weeps. Witnesses will remember this part of the visit for the rest of their lives, and they will say, honestly, that the general loved his men. Then he reaches a tent at the end of the row. He sees a soldier sitting on a cot, fully dressed, hunched forward. No bandages, no visible wound. The soldier is Charles Cool. Patton stops. He asks in the voice he uses for ceremony what is wrong with this man. Cool looks up at him. He gives the answer that has come out of the mouth of every exhausted 19-year-old since the Romans crossed the Rubicon. I guess I just can't take it. 6 words. What happens next happens in less than 30 seconds, and almost everyone in the tent will remember it differently for the rest of their lives. Patton's face changes. He pulls off his gloves. He slaps Cool across the chin once, hard, with the leather of the gloves bunched in his fist. He grabs the soldier by the collar of his shirt and yanks him to his feet. The cot tips. A canteen falls. Patton is shouting now, his voice cutting through the canvas walls, audible in the surgical tent next door. He calls him a coward. He calls him a gutless bastard. He shouts at the receiving officer not to admit this son of a bitch. He drags Cool toward the open flap of the tent, and as the soldier stumbles out into the Sicilian sun, the general actually kicks him, in the seat of his trousers. Cool staggers a few steps and falls. A medic helps him up. Patton turns back into the tent. He keeps shouting for another full minute, ordering this man sent back to the line, threatening the staff if they admit any more cases like him. The nurses do not move. A surgeon in a blood-spattered apron stands very still in the corner. A captain, a doctor, opens his mouth and then closes it. This is a 3-star general. This is the man whose name is in every newspaper in America. There is no script for what has just happened. There is no manual page. There is only the silence after the shouting and the heat and the smell of ether and the sound of Cool somewhere outside, retching into the dust. Patton walks out. His jeep pulls away. The hospital staff begin to move again, slowly at first, the way people move after a near miss on a road. A nurse goes to find Cool. She finds him on the ground beside a generator, his shirt half pulled out of his trousers, his cheek already swelling where the gloves caught him. She helps him to his feet. She does not speak. She walks him back to a cot, a different cot in a different tent, and she lays him down. That night, a thermometer is placed under his tongue. It reads 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. A blood smear taken from the inside of his elbow will, in the morning, come back positive for plasmodium. Malaria. A stool sample will confirm what the medics already suspect. Chronic dysentery. He has been sick for weeks. He has been hiding it because he did not want to leave his squad. The man George Patton called a coward had a temperature of nearly 39 degrees Celsius and parasites in his blood. That same night, 60 miles away, in his requisitioned villa, Patton sits down at a small writing desk by the window. He opens his diary. He writes a single page about his hospital visit. He notes the brave amputee. He notes the morale of the men. And he writes, in steady cursive, about the soldier he encountered at the end of the row. He calls him a weakling. He goes to bed satisfied that he has done the right thing. The lamp in his window goes out a little after 11. Across Sicily, in the dark, in 1,000 tents and 100 aid stations, the war continues. In a hospital 60 miles to the south, in a unit that has not yet entered this story, an army medic is mixing a bottle of plasma for the morning's casualties. In 2 days, his hospital will be ordered to move up to a coastal town called Santo Stefano. In 8 days, a soldier named Paul Bennett will be carried into its receiving tent against his will. And in 2 days, on the morning of August 5, Lieutenant General George S. Patton will sit at the same writing desk in the same villa, and he will draft an order that goes out to every commander in his 7th Army. It will say, in his own words, that any man going to the hospital on the pretext that he is nervously incapable of combat will be considered a coward. And he will be dealt with accordingly. The order will be signed 2 days after the slap that almost no one outside that tent yet knows about. And that is the part that changes everything, because what happened in that canvas tent outside Nicosia on the afternoon of August 3 was not a moment of temper. It was a policy. 2 days after the slap, August 5, 1943, morning. 7th Army Headquarters at Palermo. Patton at his desk by the window, a cup of coffee at his elbow, a pad of paper in front of him, his secretary waiting for the dictation. He has thought about this since he came back from Nicosia. He believes the country is being weakened. He believes the front lines are being thinned by men who choose the hospital over the foxhole. He believes a general's duty is to fix what others will not even name. And so, on the morning of August 5, he dictates a directive to every commander in his army. It is short, it is plain, it is signed in his own hand. He writes that a very small number of soldiers are going to the hospital on the pretext that they are nervously incapable of combat. He writes that such men are cowards. He writes that they bring discredit on the army and disgrace to their comrades, whom they heartlessly leave to endure the dangers of battle, while they themselves use the hospital as a means of escape. He writes that they will not be sent to the hospital. They will be dealt with in their units. Those who are not willing to fight will be tried by court-martial for cowardice in the face of the enemy. He signs it. Copies go out by motorcycle courier to every corps, every division, every regiment in the 7th Army before the end of the day. What happened in the tent at Nicosia was not an accident of temper. It is now an order, and the order has the general's name on it. Read by every captain, read by every battalion surgeon, read by every aid station medic from the western tip of Sicily to the slopes of Mount Etna. The directive will travel faster than any of them can answer it, and 5 days after that, 5 days, a coastal town called Santo Stefano enters the story. Sant'Agata di Militello and Santo Stefano di Camastra lie on the northern coast of Sicily, about 30 miles east of Nicosia. The land falls in slow terraces from the mountains down to the Tyrrhenian Sea. The roads are narrow, the houses are stone. The 93rd Evacuation Hospital has been ordered up from the rear to handle the casualties from the fight for the San Fratello line. It is a busy unit. By the morning of August 10, every cot is full. The commanding officer is Lieutenant Colonel Donald E. Courier. He is a career medical officer, about 50, soft-spoken, methodical, the kind of doctor who keeps a small notebook in his jacket pocket and writes down the names of his patients so he can ask after them by name on his rounds. He is not a confrontational man. He has not yet had the worst day of his career. That day is August 10. Private Paul G. Bennett is 21 years old. He is from North Carolina. He is 5 feet 4 inches tall, slight, with a face that looks younger than his age. He serves with Battery C of the 17th Field Artillery Regiment. He has been at the front for 4 months. He has watched men in his battery hit by mortar fragments. He has helped carry the wounded to the aid station. He has seen, up close, the things a 21-year-old should not have to see. He has not slept properly in weeks. His hands shake. His pulse will not slow down. He cannot eat. He sweats through his shirt at night, even when the air is cool. The medics see this. They tell him he is going back to the hospital. He refuses. He tells them his battery needs him. He tells them his lieutenant is short on gunners. He tells them he can hold on. He pleads, and this is the part that history records, for them to leave him with his unit. They do not. They put him in the back of an ambulance and they drive him to the 93rd Evacuation Hospital, against his will, with his rifle still slung across his chest because he would not let them take it. He arrives sometime on the morning of August 10. A nurse undresses him. A doctor examines him. The diagnosis is the same one Charles Cool received a week before. Combat fatigue. He is placed on a cot in a ward tent near the surgical area. He is given a sedative. He sits up against the pillow with his knees drawn up to his chest. He does not speak much. And outside, on the dusty road that runs along the coast, a familiar convoy is approaching. Patton arrives at the 93rd Evacuation Hospital in the early afternoon. He has come on what is by now a familiar tour. He walks the wards, he praises the wounded, he pins ribbons on the men whose wounds the surgeons can show him. He weeps where weeping is expected, and the men in the cots weep with him, because Patton at his best is still a man who can break your heart with his sincerity. He reaches a tent. He sees a young soldier sitting up on a cot, slight, no bandages, cheeks wet. Bennett is crying. The general stops. He asks the boy what is wrong with him. Bennett says quietly that his nerves are gone. He says he cannot help it. He says he hears the shells coming when there are no shells. Patton's voice changes. He says, loud enough for the next 3 tents to hear, "Your nerves, hell, you are just a goddamned coward." He slaps him, not with a glove this time, with his open hand, across the cheek that is already wet. Bennett does not move. Patton slaps him a second time. Then Patton does something he did not do at Nicosia. He reaches across his body. He unbuttons the flap of the holster on his hip. He pulls out the ivory-handled pistol that he carries everywhere he goes. He waves it in front of the boy's face. He says, in a voice that the nurses in the tent will remember for the rest of their lives, "You ought to be lined up against a wall and shot. In fact, I ought to shoot you myself, you goddamned whimpering coward. The pistol is 6 inches from a 21-year-old's eye." The tent has gone completely quiet. Lieutenant Colonel Currier, the hospital commander, has heard the shouting from his office and is now walking very fast down the gravel path. He arrives at the entrance to the tent in time to see his army commander holster the pistol and turn to him. Patton orders Currier to get this man out of the hospital. He orders him sent back to the line. He says he will not have cowards in his hospitals. Then he turns and he leaves. His jeep pulls away. The dust hangs in the air for a long time. In the tent, the nurses move first. One of them, a woman in her late 20s, by some accounts a captain in the Army Nurse Corps, goes to Bennett. She sits on the edge of the cot. She does not touch him. She just sits there. After a minute, the boy puts his face in his hands and begins to cry the way boys cry when they have been beaten by a grown man in front of other men. The nurse stays with him until the sedative takes hold. Outside the tent, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Currier stands very still on the gravel. He is a doctor. He has spent his career under a single guiding principle of medicine: first, do no harm. He has just watched a 3-star general draw a pistol on a patient on his ward. He goes back to his office. He sits down at his desk. He does not pick up the phone. He does not yet send a wire. He takes out a piece of paper and he begins to write what happened in clean, careful doctor's English, with the time, the place, the names and the words spoken, as best he and his witnesses can remember them. This is the first sentence of a piece of paper that will, in the end, almost end George Patton's career. It does not feel like a piece of paper that powerful yet. It just feels like the right thing to write down. Currier finishes the report that evening. He has it co-signed by the chief nurse and by the doctor who was nearest to the cot when the slap happened. He attaches separate witness statements from 2 other nurses and a medical orderly. Then he does something a less brave man would not have done. He does not send it to 7th Army. He does not send it to Patton's chief of staff. He sends it up the medical chain of command. His report goes to the surgeon of 2nd Corps. From there it will go to the surgeon of the North African Theatre of Operations, and from there it will go to Eisenhower's chief surgeon at Allied Force Headquarters in Algiers. A separate parallel report through the regular chain of command will go from 2nd Corps headquarters to its commanding general, Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley. 2 reports, 2 roads to the top. Courier almost certainly does not realize, when he hands the envelope to the courier on the evening of August 10, that he has just done the one thing that will make it impossible to bury this. Whether by design or by simple medical routine, the report has gone up 2 roads at once, and in the days that follow only 1/2 of that split will move the way Patton's friends want it to move. The report through 2nd Corps reaches Omar Bradley within 48 hours. Bradley is 50 years old. He is from rural Missouri. He has known Patton for over 25 years, through army postings, through Fort Benning, through the long peacetime career that brought them both to this island. Patton in Sicily is his superior. Bradley does not love him, but he understands him. He reads the report twice. He understands immediately what is on the paper in his hands. He understands that it can end Patton, and he makes a choice. He does not forward it. He folds it. He puts it in an envelope. He places the envelope in the locked drawer of his field desk. He tells his chief of staff that he will deal with it personally, in his own time, in his own way. He intends to bury it. This is not a small thing. Bradley is a careful man, a moral man by the standards of his profession. He is not protecting Patton out of friendship. He is protecting him out of a calculation about the war, about the divisions Patton has yet to lead, about what the press will do, about what Hitler will read in the New York Times if a senior American general is broken in the middle of a campaign. He sets the report aside. He locks the drawer. He goes to dinner. He does not yet know that an identical report is moving that same night up the medical chain in Algiers. He does not yet know about Demery Bess. Demery Bess is 50 years old. He is a senior war correspondent for the Saturday Evening Post. He has white hair. He wears tweed jackets even in the North African heat. He has been reporting on Europe since before there were Nazis, and he is the kind of journalist that other journalists go to when they don't know what to do with a story. In the 2nd week of August, a doctor he knows, a doctor he has shared whiskey with in a tent in Tunisia, sits down across from him in a mess hall in Algiers and tells him what happened in a hospital in Sicily. The doctor is frightened. He is not asking Bess to print anything. He is asking Bess what he should do. Bess listens for a long time. He is a careful man. He is also an old hand. He understands what this story is. He understands, with the clarity of a reporter who has covered war for 20 years, that this is not a story he can print and walk away from. He thanks the doctor. He walks across the compound to the office of the Commander-in-Chief, Allied Force, Mediterranean Theatre. He asks to see General Eisenhower. He is not turned away. What passes between Demery Bess and Dwight Eisenhower in that office, no one outside the room ever heard for certain. What we know is what happened after. Eisenhower reads the medical channel report that arrives that same week through his chief surgeon. He sits with both pieces of paper on his desk, the report from the doctors, and the notes from his conversation with Bess. He does not raise his voice, he does not pace, he puts his elbows on the desk, and he holds his head in his hands for a long time. He understands that the regular chain of command has gone silent, that the report through 2nd Corps has not reached him, and is not going to. He understands that he must now act, alone, without the cover his subordinates have tried to give Patton. He picks up his pen. On August 17, 1943, 1 week and 1 day after the slap at Santo Stefano, Eisenhower writes a private letter to George Patton. It is 2.5 pages. It is the kind of letter that does not survive in many copies, because the men who write them do not want them to survive. Eisenhower writes that he is shocked. He writes that the conduct described is wholly inconsistent with the standards of an officer of the United States Army. He writes that no formal investigation will be opened, and the words "no formal investigation" are the most important words in the letter, although Patton will not understand this for several months. He writes that Patton will personally apologize, not in a memo, not in a press release, in person, to Private Cool, to Private Bennett, to the doctors and nurses of the 15th Evacuation Hospital, to the doctors and nurses of the 93rd Evacuation Hospital, to every division of the 7th Army assembled with Patton standing in front of them in his own voice. The letter is sealed. It is hand-carried by a courier Eisenhower trusts to Sicily. It arrives on Patton's desk on the morning of August 19. He reads it twice. He sits with it for a long time. He understands, in a way that men in his position rarely understand anything, that he has come within a single signature of the end of his career. He picks up the telephone. He begins to call his division commanders. The apology tour will last almost a month. In the third week of August, while Patton is preparing his speeches, Dwight Eisenhower does one more thing. He invites 3 war correspondents to his office in Algiers. Demery Bess is there, Quentin Reynolds of Collier's is there, Merrill Mueller of NBC is there. Other reporters will be brought into the circle in the days that follow. John Charles Daly of CBS, and through him a chain of others until perhaps a dozen senior American newsmen in the theater know the story. Eisenhower does not lie to them. He tells them what happened. He tells them what he has done. He tells them what Patton has been ordered to do. And then he asks them a question. He asks them not to print it. He tells them that Patton is the most valuable combat commander the United States has in the field. He tells them that the Italian campaign is not finished and the invasion of France is still ahead. He tells them that Adolf Hitler reads the American papers, that the German High Command tracks every American general by name, and that the loss of Patton, broken in public over the face of a private named Bennett, would cost more American lives than any of them can count. He does not order them, he asks them. The newsmen look at each other. These are not soft men. Quentin Reynolds has been bombed in London. Merrill Mueller has reported from the Russian front. Demery Bess has been on 3 continents in 18 months. They have seen what war does to soldiers, and they have no illusions about what George Patton just did in a tent in Sicily. But they also see the map. They see the divisions still in the line. They see the boys still to come. And one by one they agree. The story will be held. It will be held for 100 days. It will be held until a Sunday in November when a man named Drew Pearson, who was not in that room, who was not asked, and who was not bound by any agreement made in Algiers, sits down in a radio studio in Washington, D.C. and reads on the air what dozens of American officers and a handful of American journalists already know. But that comes later. For now, in Sicily, in late August, George Patton is loading his jeep with a folder of notes and a list of units, and he is beginning the longest drive of his life. He is going from division to division, from hospital to hospital, from the men of the 1st to the men of the 2nd Armoured to the men of the 9th, to stand in front of them, in his own voice, and say the words he does not want to say. He does not say them well. In most of the speeches, he does not actually apologize. He talks about discipline. He talks about morale. He talks about how a man must master his fear. He says more than once that he believed the soldiers in the hospitals were faking, and that if he was wrong, he is sorry he was wrong. He does not say he is sorry he slapped them. The men in the audiences listen in silence. Some of them clap politely. Some of them clap from real loyalty. Patton is still Patton, and there are men in those formations who would follow him into the gates of hell and back. But in the rear ranks, in the regiments of the 1st Infantry Division that have been bleeding since Africa, there are also men who simply turn their heads away. They will not forget, and neither will the nurse who sat on Paul Bennett's cot. And neither will Lieutenant Colonel Donald Currier, sitting at his desk on the coast of Sicily, who has just received word that his medical chain report has reached Algiers, and that the commander of the Allied forces in the Mediterranean has read every word of it. He does not yet know what will happen. He does not yet know who Drew Pearson is. He only knows that he wrote down what he saw. And in 3 months and 10 days, on the other side of an ocean, that piece of paper is going to come back into the world. November 21st, 1943, a Sunday in Washington, D.C. The air is cold, a radio studio, a small table, a microphone on a stand. A man in his middle 40s sits down with a stack of typed pages and lays them in front of him. His name is Drew Pearson. He is 45 years old. He writes a syndicated column called Washington Merry-Go-Round. On Sunday nights, he reads a version of it on the radio. He has more enemies in Washington than any man not currently serving in elected office. He has been called a scoundrel by senators and a liar by cabinet secretaries. He keeps a file on every single one of them. Tonight he has a story. He did not get it from Demery Bess. He did not get it from Quentin Reynolds. He did not get it in a room in Algiers, where General Eisenhower asked the gentlemen of the press to do the right thing. He got it from his own sources, from an officer who had been in Sicily, from a doctor who had come home. From a piece of paper that had passed through too many hands. He has made no agreement with Eisenhower. He has not been asked. At 9 o'clock Eastern Time, the red light on the wall of the studio goes on, and Drew Pearson begins to read. He tells the country that General George S. Patton has, in the past months, struck 2 enlisted men in evacuation hospitals in Sicily. He gives the names, he gives the dates. He says that Patton was reprimanded by General Eisenhower, but that no formal action was taken. He stops. He thanks his listeners. The light goes off. The story is out. By Monday morning, it is on the front page of every newspaper in America. The reaction is not what Patton or Eisenhower expected. It is worse. Telegrams flood the White House. Mothers of soldiers in the Pacific write to their congressmen. The Senate floor opens within 72 hours, and a senator from Tennessee, a senator from New Jersey, and a senator from Florida rise, in turn, to demand the removal of George Patton from command. A congressman from Pennsylvania calls for a formal investigation. Other voices rise in his defense. A senator from Ohio says the country owes Patton its gratitude, not its scorn. A retired general writes an open letter saying that men who have never been within 1,000 miles of a battlefield should be careful before they pass judgment on those who have. The newspapers run editorials on both sides. The Hearst papers defend Patton. The New York Times calls for a War Department review. Radio commentators debate it nightly for almost 3 weeks, and in Algiers, Dwight Eisenhower picks up the telephone and calls Washington. He defends Patton. He tells the War Department that the discipline has already been administered. He tells them that the apologies have already been given. He tells them that Patton is the finest combat commander the United States possesses, and that removing him from the field in the middle of a war to satisfy a column written by Drew Pearson would be an act of strategic stupidity that the American people would pay for in graves. He puts his own career behind the statement. The War Department holds. Patton stays in uniform, but he does not get a command. Not in November, not in December, not in January, when the planning for the invasion of France enters its final phase. Not in February, not in March, not in April, not in May. For nearly 11 months, the most aggressive American general of the war sits in a series of headquarters offices, attending briefings he is not allowed to act on, watching other men receive the commands that should have been his. He writes long letters to his wife. He goes for long walks alone. He understands slowly that the slap in a tent in Sicily has cost him the invasion of Europe. And then in the late winter of 1944, something strange happens. He is given a job. It is not a real job. It is a ghost. In January 1944, Allied intelligence officers in London begin what will become the largest military deception operation in the history of warfare. It has a name. It is called Operation Fortitude. Its purpose is to make Adolf Hitler believe that the coming invasion of France will land at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, when in fact it will land 200 miles to the southwest, on the beaches of Normandy. To make Hitler believe this, the deception planners need an army. They invent one. They call it the First United States Army Group. They give it shoulder patches. They give it radio operators sending fake traffic from empty fields in southeast England. They give it inflatable rubber tanks parked in orchards. They give it wooden landing craft tied up in the Thames estuary, and they give it a commander. The commander of this ghost army has to be a man Hitler will believe. He has to be a man the German General Staff already considers the most dangerous American in uniform. He has to be a man whose name on a piece of paper makes a panzer division dig in deeper. There is only one man in the United States Army who fits that description. His name is George Patton. He is given the appointment. He puts on his stars. He walks across fake parade grounds in front of fake formations, and German aerial reconnaissance photographs him every time he does it. He gives a speech at the opening of a welcome club for American servicemen in Knutsford, England. That gets quoted in the German press. He is, for 6 months, the most photographed general in the European theatre, and he has not commanded a single soldier in combat in nearly a year. The Germans believe. Hitler keeps the German 15th Army, along with significant armoured reserves, parked at the Pas de Calais on June 6, 1944, and for weeks afterwards waiting for the real invasion that they are certain Patton is about to lead. It never comes. The Allies land at Normandy. The 15th Army is held in place by the ghost of George S. Patton until it is too late to matter. Historians have argued ever since about how many American and British and Canadian lives that bought. The number is not small. There is a kind of bitter justice in it that no one in the tent at Santo Stefano could have imagined. The slap that almost ended Patton's career put him in exactly the position the Allies needed him to be in on the most important morning of the 20th century. The humiliation became the weapon, and in late July of 1944, after the breakout at Saint-Lô, George Patton is finally given a real army again, the Third, and he begins the drive across France that he was born to make. But he is not the same man. The papers will not let him be. The country will not let him be. And the soldiers he commands from the summer of 1944 to the spring of 1945 will salute him and follow him and bleed for him, knowing exactly what he did in a tent in Sicily and exactly what the country said about it afterwards. He is great. He is also, finally, smaller than he was. In December of 1945, with the war over, with Germany defeated, with his Third Army parked in occupation duty across southern Bavaria, George Patton goes hunting near Mannheim with a friend. Their staff car is struck by a slow-moving truck at an intersection on the way. Patton is thrown forward and strikes his head against the steel partition behind the driver's seat. His third and fourth cervical vertebrae are fractured. He is paralyzed from the neck down. He lives for 12 days in a hospital in Heidelberg, conscious lucid, joking with the nurses to the end. He dies on December 21, 1945. He is 60 years old. He is buried in a military cemetery in Luxembourg in a single-file row with the men of his Third Army by his own request, so that, in his words, he could rest with the soldiers who had died under his command. Charles Kuhl goes home to Mishawaka, Indiana. He goes back to laying carpet. He marries. He raises a family. He never sues the army. He never gives a newspaper interview asking for an apology. When reporters call, in the years after the war, he is polite and brief. He says that General Patton was a great soldier. He says that the slap was a long time ago. He says he holds no grudge. He dies in 1971, at the age of 55. His grave is in a small cemetery a few miles from the house he grew up in. Paul Bennett, whatever the order George Patton shouted in the tent at Santo Stefano, is never sent back to combat. The medics and the line officers who handle him after Patton leave Sicily quietly arrange a series of rear area assignments that keep him out of the rifle squads for the rest of the war. He goes home to North Carolina. He lives a private life. He does not give interviews. He outlives Patton by decades. Lieutenant Colonel Donald Currier serves the rest of the war as a medical officer. He never writes a memoir. He never seeks credit for the report he filed on the evening of August 10, 1943. He simply goes back to medicine. And the nurses who sat with Paul Bennett until the sedative took hold, the nurses who signed Currier's report, the nurses who did not turn away in a tent in Sicily, the nurses whose names are not in most of the books written about Patton, go back, like millions of other Americans, to a country that has begun to forget what they did. They die in their own beds, in their own time. Most of them never told their grandchildren the story. It would be 37 years before the condition that Paul Bennett was hospitalized for, the condition that George Patton called cowardice, would be given a name the United States military would accept. In 1980, the American Psychiatric Association published the third edition of its Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It included for the first time a formal diagnosis. Post-traumatic stress disorder. The soldiers who had come home from Korea and Vietnam and every war since finally had a word for what was happening to them. The word came too late for Charles Kuhl. It came too late for Paul Bennett. It came too late for the men of the 1st Infantry Division who had broken down in the rocks above Troina in the summer of 1943. But it came. And in the quiet rooms of veterans' hospitals across America in the long years since, Every soldier diagnosed with that disorder, every father and every grandfather who finally got a name for the nightmares, is the descendant of a piece of paper that a soft-spoken army doctor sat down to write on the evening of August 10, 1943, on the northern coast of a small Italian island, after he had watched a 3-star general draw a pistol on a 21-year-old boy. That doctor did not know he was changing anything. He thought he was just writing down what he saw, and in the end, that is how almost every important thing in history gets written, not by the generals, by the men and women who refuse to look away.